secret number 7.
Empathy is really the mortar that builds the building. It is the thing that keeps the bricks together. You know, we used to think that it was sexuality. And unfortunately, as it turns out, that isn't true, because as people get older, sexuality becomes less and less important. Or when children are born, sexuality becomes less and less important. So what is that thing that keeps a couple together for decades? It's empathy. And empathy, of course, is guessing what somebody's feelings are and what their needs are, and listening and understanding and supporting them in such a way that they're able to live a peaceful, happy, successful life with you, and that together as a team you're able to solve whatever comes up and avoid the rest. And so that's empathy. So on a first date, if you're empathetic and you really seem to care, and you ask someone, well, you know, it's so great that you were able to meet me at 7 o'clock. That must have been a rush for you, because obviously you went home after work and you look beautiful. So that's a way of empathizing, that somebody had to put a lot of time and energy into their appearance, preparing themselves for a date. And I don't think I ever had a guy in all those, 40 years I dated say anything like that to me. And yet I was always, I would leave the office, or if I worked out of my house in the fashion industry half of the time, I would stop work early, I'd go have my hair done, my nails would be done, I'd shower, change my makeup, change my clothes, whatever. And it's like everybody assumed that, I was born that way with all that stuff intact. It was crazy. If anyone had been empathetic, they would have realized the kind of effort,
Oh, you gave off a terrific image.
But still, empathy would be so helpful,
That's
wouldn't
right.
it? And
That's
you're
right.
the same, so I know
Yes.
you did exactly the same thing too. Yeah, so empathy, that you really begin to understand the feelings and needs of a woman, can make you the irresistible choice for that woman, compared to somebody who may be better looking or wealthier or famous or anything else, can lose the race because he just doesn't have the ability to empathize.
That empathy, boy. What is the magical commodity, magnetism or charisma, and how can a man actually develop that?
If you ever look at somebody who has just had really, really good news, they are glowing. And it doesn't matter what they look like. And it doesn't matter really anything about that particular piece of good news. It is a star quality. Now, for someone who's an actor, they're able to generate that star quality from nothing. So they have a different brain chemistry from the average person. And they're able to generate this excitement and this magic, this charisma, this magnetism, and people feel it. And that's what you want to develop. If you're looking to be more successful with women, that's what you want to develop. And it is an innate sexuality, magnetism, charisma. It's a little bit different in those 3 different words, but the common denominator of those 3 different words, magnetism, charisma, and sex appeal, is that other people are drawn to you. Women are drawn to you. And it's an intensity. It's a intensity that you basically are. And that you also, as a man, shoot out towards her. So it's like intense magnetic rays. And women feel it. And they can, even if their back is to you, they can feel it if you're behind them. And they can turn around because they feel somebody literally boring a hole in their head, the back of their head. And that's a magnetic, charismatic connection. And it takes practice, and you must learn how to do it. If you want to be really successful with women, you need to learn how to do it, and I teach people to do it all the time.
Oh, and that's thrilling. It's a great trait to learn. Now, we're going to go into a clip. Could you tell us what we're going to be viewing tonight?
Well, I want you to be surprised, but If you are somebody who thinks that you can never grow up, this video is for you. Cartoon. Well, Peter Pan was clearly a little boy. And in many ways, he is irresistible. He is captivating and irresistible. And that's where you have to be really careful. Because if you're showing fairy tales to your children, we talked about Cinderella 2 weeks ago. Now we're talking about Peter Pan and Wendy. These things don't go away. As my friend Andrea Marcovici, the singer, says, these are the stories that create disaster and tragedy in, she laughs and says, in her life and the lives of so many women. I mean, it can be true.
So this is really a reality check once again. And that's what I appreciate about you sharing with us all the time. Underneath it all. Okay, so now the subtitle of Peter Pan is the boy who would never grow up.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, is that really the whole story?
Well, yeah, I mean, you've met these guys, you've met them, you've dated them, some of you've married them, and many of you have told me about how miserable the experience was. And I'm saying, but these were charming boys. Charming boys. One of the many answers I give when people say, why don't you have children? Why didn't you have children? And sometimes I'm serious about all the different reasons, but a lot of times I say, if I'd ever fallen in love with a guy who didn't need a mother, who would have been capable to be a real father, I probably would have had children. But since I never fell in love with guys like that, I fell in love with guys who were much too Peter Panish. And you're not going to do well if you have a child with a husband or a father like Peter Pan, are you? I mean, it's not a good idea.
So this is really bringing up an awareness of what you need to consider before you do make a commitment. I really appreciate that. Now, what is Wendy's part in this Peter Pan and Wendy dynamic? And would you term this as an enabler to describe her?
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you're using psychotherapeutic terminology, there's no question. Because if you're doing all the things for Peter, then you're going to wake up one day as Wendy did, and she wanted to go home, and she went home. She'd had enough, and, they ended up back in the nursery, and then if you remember the end of the story, then Peter goes back to Neverland, or maybe he never left, I can't recall, and then he ends up in the window sometime later, and he thinks the little girl in the bed is actually Wendy. In fact, it's Wendy's child, it's her daughter. And he has a conversation with Wendy's daughter. And that's where you get, like chills. This gives me chills even now, because how many of the men that I dated who wouldn't grow up with me wouldn't grow up with the next woman, and wouldn't grow up with the next woman, and the next woman, and the next woman. And, there was Alexis dying in his 70s, and he had never grown up. And he had serious, serious problems because of it. I mean, here's a guy who died alone when there had been so many of us madly in love with this guy all of his life. And by the time I had just been thoroughly disgusted and left, and then the woman after me left, and then the final woman left when he was dying. So that's a pretty dramatic statement. I was stunned when I heard that. So that's a really terrible death. And at some point, it's all about growing up, facing your responsibilities, being able to care about other people enough. And that, of course, one of the things about Peter Pan, and I'll read this for you, the line is so great. This is from Wikipedia, if you want to read more about it. They're talking about Tinkerbell. You remember the little magical fairy who was just shown as a light on the stage. It is hinted later that Tinkerbell may have had romantic feelings for Peter, but he doesn't return them, as he is completely oblivious of other people's feelings. We love that line.
Yeah, how sad it is.
I just love it.
Oh, unfortunately, they sometimes aren't even aware that they lost the best thing, right? They never
Well, they're
admit
oblivious,
it.
means they're not aware.
Exactly.
So
They're
they're
just-
never aware. That's
Thank
right.
you for.
Oblivious is such a great, word here, because you can't judge someone who's oblivious. You can't criticize someone who's oblivious. You just have to accept someone who is oblivious, and if you're smart, move on. I love that show. I love that show. And I got chills even now, having just watched this when we picked the clip, yeah. So if you're a man looking for a woman to fall in love with you, my suggestion is you actually want a woman to fall in love with you and you fall in love with her. You're looking for the most wonderful, lifelong, mutual relationship in the world. That way, everybody has a wonderful time.
That's perfect. What about this sex appeal? How is that different from charisma?
Well, people who are great performers can have tremendous charisma and not sex appeal. I can think of a lot of them. Like, Richard Burton and Liz Taylor had as much sex appeal as a couple as anyone you can ever think of. And then there are lots and lots of other actors, John Gielgud and Alec Guinness, if you look at British actors. They have tremendous charisma. They're not sexy guys. They weren't sexy guys. Think about that. It's not just because some of them are handsome. So if you think about a young Warren Beatty, or you think about Brad Pitt when he hit the screen for the very first time, there's an irresistible sexuality. My friend Michael Nouri in Flashdance, one of the sexiest guys in the history of the world to be on the screen. And it's a quality of sex appeal which is different from their magnetism and different from their charisma and different from their star quality. And sex appeal is biochemical. We know that it's pheromones. So it's the kind of thing you either have it or you don't have it. You and I, we were lucky, we had it. And so there's not that much you can do about it. Now, you can learn how to move differently. You can certainly learn how to dress differently, change your hair, and if you're a woman, makeup and all that. But you're still not going to have the same unbelievable sex appeal as someone who's born with that. Because if you could look at Sophia Loren when she was young, and it's just an irresistible sexuality that she had, even before she had real charisma. When she was just a girl and she was in a beauty pageant. So it's three different things. They're slightly different, and there are tools and skills that I teach that allow you to transform it. And somebody who is a type A male usually has charisma and has magnetism and may not have sexuality. I don't think there are many people who think Donald Trump is sexy. They do, however, acknowledge that he has a lot of charisma and a lot of magnetism, which is how he got elected. And they do acknowledge that Hillary Clinton does not have much sex appeal to most people, doesn't have the same charisma, doesn't have the same magnetism, which I believe is probably why she didn't get elected. I'd like to think it's all because of people's policies, but I know it's not. So think about that. How to develop those qualities which can be enhanced. You're not going to go from 0 to 100, and they can be enhanced.
Very hopeful, and you can help.
You bet.
Now, what is appropriate sexuality on a date? You hear a lot of different things these days.
This is cultural. This has to do with social strata. So what is appropriate for a 20-year-old girl who comes from a very religious family may have nothing at all to do with what a 45-year-old divorced woman believes is appropriate. So your job is to really figure out who you're going out with before you go out with her. So you have a sense. Now, I don't think there's anybody who would have been pleased to have a guy reach through the car window and grab her. So that's not going to work with anybody. However, there are men who are very, very sexy, very charismatic, very magnetic, and they have a very different result on a date than a guy who isn't like that. And the other thing is that they're not desperate, they're not pushy, they're like going with the flow, and they're seeing how the woman responds. You know, the woman will say that's enough, or she'll indicate that that's enough, or she'll actually say no, and it'll be fine. Okay, let's get another drink. So you have to really read the situation, which for some men takes training. And what I find very interesting is in this day and age, I'm surprised how many men I work with who think that what I consider to be normal, appropriate engagement from a man, they consider kind of scary for them to do that.
Okay.
You know, to them it looks like, oh, well, that's too forward. Well, you know, they're beautiful women are not that frequent, and every guy wants to date her. And if you don't let her know that you're interested, and if you don't ask her to lunch or dinner or a coffee or a drink quickly, then, you know, she's moving on. She doesn't have time for lots of emails back and forth. She doesn't have time for lots of phone conversation. She may not have time for any. I mean, it may be simply a contest that she's free next Friday, and whoever asks her out for dinner first may get the date. And so you really have to think to yourself, do I want to go out with this woman or don't I? And if I want to go out with her, then I have to be motivating, and yet I also have to be direct. And that's the key. You have to learn how to do both.
Clarity and appeal. Now, what about after the first date? How can a man actually show that he is interested without laying it on too thick?
Well, what you're looking for during the date is you're looking for your own success to be so visible by the way the woman responds that you know that she's looking forward to you calling and asking her out again. Now, if anything was discussed during the evening, such as a sports team or some sort of musical group or some kind of restaurant or venue, then you have a perfect opportunity. You can call her the next day, which you really should do if you're interested. If you're really interested in a woman, you call her the next day. I'm not saying after you sleep with her, I mean period. Just any date. You call her the next day, you tell her you hope she had a great time. That's the first thing you say. Hope you had a really good time. I want to let you know I did, and I would love to see you again. Yeah, you're a guy. You have to be willing to hear somebody say no. If you're a salesman, you have to be willing to hear somebody say no. But if you're hemming and hawing and fumfering around, that's already not sexy. That's already creepy. So the opportunity during the first date is to finesse for information about what she likes. You will have already looked through her Facebook. You will have already looked through her LinkedIn. You will have already Googled her. You will have already done all the things that I advise you to do, and you'll have a lot of information about her. You know where she works by now, and you will have looked on the website. So when you know that, you've got a pretty good idea of what she'd enjoy doing. And if you're a guy who's not like the most irresistible guy on the planet for whatever reason, and you haven't been able to move beyond some of the behaviors so that you really are irresistible, then one way in is to invite her to do something you know she wants to do. Then you've got another evening to show her how irresistible you are.
I love that word, just the sound of it.
Irresistible.
Yes. Is there a downside, Susan, to moving too quickly with sex in a new relationship?
Boy, is there ever. It's going to cloud your judgment about whether this person is a potential partner for you. This is far more dangerous than you may realize. When you have sex with someone, even if you're a guy, and men don't become as emotionally engaged as women do, but if this woman is really pretty and that's what you like, and this woman is really sexy and that's what you like, I have to tell you from lots of men that I've worked with, it's going to be difficult for you to spot crazy. And even if you spot it, it's going to be difficult for you to disengage from it. So even if a woman would love to be physically intimate with you in the very first or second or third date, you know that I'm advising her the same thing, that she should wait so she really knows who you are. But the bottom line is you should force yourself to wait a bit, because you've got to find out how someone behaves when everything isn't wonderful. You have to see how they behave if they had a long day at work, if they had a difficult week at the office, if they have problems with a family member, if they don't feel terrific. Because if you're going to be in a long-term relationship with somebody, you're going to find out about this. And you want to find out if they're angry, if they're nasty, if they're sarcastic, if they're weepy, if they disengage and disappear. All of this stuff, you would have to pay a very high price if you find it out too late. So see if you can put the brakes on for yourself.
Thank you, Susan. Now, what if a woman does not respond positively? Should he move on to the next woman right away?
Unless you believe that she is the love of your life and that you've got something up your sleeve that you can use to motivate her. There are 8 billion people on the planet Earth, so don't be that guy who keeps opening up the oyster shells again and again looking for a pearl to have suddenly appeared. So if there wasn't a pearl there the first time, in most cases you want to move on. You're not her type, she's not your type, next.
In our last couple of minutes, this is really the hot question here. Now, what if she is really madly in love? Then what?
Well, first of all, repeat everything you did that worked. Notice what you did that wasn't particularly successful and delete. So when a woman is falling in love with you, repeat and delete. That means repeat what works, delete what doesn't. Now, let me send you the feelings and needs lists so you understand with more clarity what your needs are and you can identify what a woman's needs are likely to be. And when you realize that this has a lot to do with the part of someone's brain that's most active, then in the next show we do about, now she's in love, what do we do? Then you'll hear more about how to understand in advance and with very little data. Often I can tell just from somebody's profile online what her needs are.